Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's first video we're going to have a look at major hurricane Milton. Now this is a bit of a different video. We don't normally have a look at things outside of the UK in too much detail, but I thought because there's such a major story that we're seeing at the moment and there's a lot of misinformation going around about it, I thought it'd be a good thing to address this from specifically a meteorological standpoint. Again, warnings, things like that, the direct impacts, leave that up to the experts, the NHC, and all the weather providers out in the United States. But I thought we'll look from a meteorological standpoint, looking at the current data we've got for the system, the potential track, and specifically the reasons why this storm has rapidly intensified and is so powerful at the moment. There are some very specific reasons why, and no, it's not due to the fact that people in America can control the weather, or this is something to do with some sort of mysterious machine or whatever. There are very specific sort of atmospheric factors that have allowed this storm to become the beast that it is. So do remember, if you enjoyed the videos, do like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now if you start on theweathernerds.org and have a look at some of the satellite data. This is the latest satellite data. Recording this on Tuesday evening. I know I'm going to post this on Wednesday morning, but this is data as of late on Tuesday evening. And you can see it's just off the north coast of Mexico here, slowly heading northwards and eastwards, looking like it's going to make landfall around the Tampa Bay area. Now, over the past sort of 36 hours or so, it has changed a lot. Through Monday evening, that's when sort of headlines really started popping off of this major hurricane, be a Category 6, which, for your information, doesn't exist. Category 5 is the max, and things just stay at Category 5 above that. And it did officially get to the fourth strongest, in terms of mean sea level pressure, storm ever in the North Atlantic, or the Atlantic Basin, which includes the Gulf of Mexico. It got down to 896 millibars at the centre of its system, which is incredible. Again, it's very difficult to put that into perspective, but essentially, in the UK, for example, we rarely get systems much below 950 millibars. We have, and it's happened, and even recent years, we have seen some severe named storms, yellow or amber, and red warnings issued, seeing systems get slightly below that, but nothing close to 896 millibars, which is ridiculously low pressure. Now, in fact, what not a lot of people have been talking about is the fact that this actually, through much of Tuesday, weakened significantly, and that's because it got pretty much too strong for its current structure. You can see it's not actually that big of a hurricane in terms of its overall size. Of course, it packs a punch, but it's not actually that big in terms of its actual span. The eye wall, when we got the fly through that sort of gave us that reading of 896 millibars, estimated the eye wall around 3.8 miles, which is actually quite small. For some hurricanes we've seen over the years, Category 5, all they've done Category 1, have been 2, 3, 4 times that size in eye wall, basically meaning the structure of the system is very small. And what we saw through Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, UK time we saw the system weaken through an eye wall replacement cycle. This is essentially where the eye wall collapses in on itself because the system is too strong, and it reforms as a bigger eye with a stronger eye wall in the subsequent hours. So it temporarily weakens itself to re-strengthen in the coming hours. So actually, we saw the system get downgraded to a Category 3 storm earlier, and we believe it's now back up to a Category 5 simply from satellite data. But again, we'll have to wait for some more flyovers to verify that it's got up to that strength. We're fairly sure from the looks of the latest satellite data, but we'll have to wait for that official flyover to make sure it's got back to Category 5 status and have a look at its latest mean sea level pressure towards the centre of the system. Now, this is the latest infrared, and if we do try and zoom in a little bit, you can see it is a really big system. Winds as of Monday evening to Tuesday morning, 180 mile per hour sustained, up to 200 mile per hour gusts. Fourth strongest system we've ever seen in the Atlantic Basin. said 896 millibars towards the centre. Of course, don't know what it is exactly right now, but it's probably something similar, maybe even something slightly stronger, and we'll have to wait the coming hours to see exactly what it gets to. But regardless, it's going to pack an absolute punch. It's going to be a devastating storm, and you can see it here. It is really quite photogenic and beautiful from a visual imagery standpoint. A really succinct structure, and you can see that convection there with those with those purples, greys, and darker reds and blacks, indicating very high cloud tops. You can see it is in a perfect spiral there, just showing you the immense structure of this system. If we also have a look at the visible for this, again, you can see beautiful structure, very succinct eye, and again, just showing you the strength of this system as it slowly heads towards Florida. Now, if you go over to the NHC now, this is of course, the best place to look at for all data and warnings for a hurricane. Again, we won't go into this in too much detail, as I know most people are not going to be directly impacted by this who watch this, so don't really need to know the exact specifics about the impacts. But if you are anywhere close by to this, make sure you do look at the NHC, as it is very, very important. You can see, though, numerous warnings issued up and down Florida for hurricane and tropical storm warnings, and some watches as well. And you can see it is going to be a major hurricane, most likely on arrival, but the majority of runs do actually weaken it, probably down to a Cat 4 or maybe even a Cat 3, because it does encounter a bit of instability in terms of its structure as it approaches, and we'll explain why it does that in a minute. So even though it is a severe system at the moment, it's absolutely beautifully photogenic on the satellite data, it actually does look like it's going to encounter a bit of trouble on approach to Florida. Again, massive uncertainty exactly how much trouble, whether it will resist that, whether subtle changes in the forecast will allow it to stay at a Category 5. But most runs have it weakening on approach to Florida and then rapidly weakening as it makes landfall and then clears out into the Atlantic. So at the moment, the storm is probably peaking in intensity, either now or in the coming hours. It is probably at its peak intensity, and then it slowly drops off in the coming hours. Of course, very strong winds associated with this. We're expecting the wind field to be pretty large. Again, not record-breaking in terms of the size of the wind field. It is, as I said, still going to be a relatively small system compared to what hurricanes can get to in size. And you see, again, we're expecting the big winds, the big storm surge to be around the Tampa Bay area. As said, with this system, probably one of the biggest impacts that we will get is with the storm surge. If I go storm surge, actually, you see 10 to 15 feet expected around that Tampa Bay area, and of course tapering off elsewhere. Again, even if it does downgrade itself in terms of its category, it still will probably keep these very high storm surges, because all of that water has been built up, those waves have been built up out in the Gulf of Mexico. When the system is in a Category 5, it's more about the longevity of the system with those stronger winds than the immediate severity as it makes landfall. If it's suddenly gone from Category 1 to Category 5 in the space of a couple of hours on landfall, the storm surge probably won't actually be all too much, because those winds have not had time to churn up the water. But it's been a Category 5 for multiple days, like this system will have been. That water is churned up, and that storm surge will be very, very big. So that could probably be the biggest impact from this system. Of course, a lot of rainfall potential. You can see it's not ridiculous, not out of this world. Of course, we've seen hurricanes around the Gulf of Mexico that are much slower moving. We've seen 20, 30 inches of rainfall. Here, more around the 8 to 12 inches of rain. Still a lot of rain, still causing flash flooding, especially a lot of Florida is low-lying area, a lot of marshland. So again, we will expect flooding, but it is a fairly fast-moving system across Florida. So hopefully we shouldn't see anything. Well, it is still going to be devastating. That's an understatement. But it could have been worse if this was slower moving in terms of its rainfall. And you can also see flash flooding potential is pretty high. Again, that's mostly due to the very high rainfall rates moving through, again, associated with the centre of the system. Now, if you have a look at some of the other data, this is the latest ensemble track from the ECMWF. And you can see, actually, as this was initiated, which is earlier today, today's earlier run, you can see how it was actually weaker at the start of this run. More oranges here, indicating the max winds were a little bit weaker. And you can see as it heads back further out into the Gulf, it strengthens once again into a very strong Cat 5. This model was done under sort of at the moment the eye wall replacement cycle was taking place. So that's why you can see it looks weak at the moment, turning stronger and then weakening on arrival. There is a lot of uncertainty though. Some keep it exceptionally strong, very close to the shore before weakening, but you can see the majority of runs, if we just look right along that coast, are losing that pink and purples. Most are more oranges or reds. Again, still severe, still terrible, still devastating, but not as bad as what it was in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. Now again, this data is a bit old. This will be from the ECMWF earlier on Tuesday, so by the time you're watching this, it's probably a good 12 hours out of date. But again, we're not expecting huge shifts. This gives us the overall sort of trend though. Very strong on arrival, weakening immediately before landfall, and you can see it really tailoring off towards the end of this run. Another chart to show is the model intensity. This is from tropicaltidbits.com, and you can see as of the forecast hour of this, which is midday on Tuesday, so again probably about 12 hours old in terms of runs available. As of you watching this, you can see it is Cat 5, most likely staying Cat 5 the next sort of 12 to 24 hours. Some runs intensifying it slightly, most though, as it makes arrival, which is most likely around the 36 to 48 hour mark, it goes from Cat 5 down to Cat 4, maybe even Cat 3. Now you can see actually most keeping it in Cat 4, which again shows you that not all the models are that sort of specific with its exact wind speeds. Again, models at this sort of scale can't quite comprehend the intensity of some of these systems. So I wouldn't take the exact wind speeds on the y-axis as gospel, but it's the trends we're looking at, the weakening trends. Regardless of that top wind speed, the trends will be roughly correct. And what we're seeing is a slow drop-off on approach, which is around the 36 to 40 hour mark, and then a big drop-off as it makes landfall, and then it looks like it's going to stay weaker. You can see a few keep it very strong. Those probably have a slightly different track, maybe keeping it out in the Gulf of Mexico. Again, very weird to see that. But you can see the majority of runs have it weakening and then dropping off substantially. So again, that backs up that view that on approach, it most likely will drop to a Cat 3 or Cat 4. But again, so many factors are at play that it could just about hold on. Now I do want to just finish the video by having a look at some of the reasons why this system is so strong. Now we've got a lot of misinformation out there about the exact data of this system. Again, talking about how it's a Cat 6, it's the strongest we've ever seen. Again, it is a very strong system. A lot of the stuff you are seeing online is exaggerated for clicks. Do go onto the NHC website or a reputable meteorologist for America, and they'll have some accurate data on this system. But I did want to just address the actual, reasons why this system is so strong. It's not down to people controlling the weather. It's not down to any major specific reasons. Again, you could link it back to climate change and say there's the potential that the sea surface temperatures and the air wouldn't be this warm without global warming. You could link it back to that, but I think anyone saying this is a direct consequence of climate change, you are sort of extrapolating a little bit there. But we can have a look at Shear model data, and this is the reasons why this system is so strong. Now, what we're looking at here is wind shear. Again, it's not something we look at too much in sort of our day-to-day videos. It goes into a little bit more, too much detail than what we need. But it explains this hurricane and the reasons for it very well. Now, you may have heard about wind shear and forecasting hurricanes before, and essentially it's how much change in direction is there throughout the atmosphere in terms of wind direction and strength. So we've got very high wind shear, we've got a lot of changing winds as we go up the pressure levels, so going up in elevation in the atmosphere. And high wind shear is not good for development of a hurricane. So if you think about it, if you've got big convective plumes going through the atmosphere, if you've got wind directions changing, it cuts off that plume, it changes the air temperature, changes the pressure levels, and it basically kind of rips apart that convection, or at least doesn't let it get anywhere near as strong. Of course, you're never going to get zero wind shear. The atmosphere is not going to be completely stationary all throughout. The winds are not going to be in the same exact direction, the same strength throughout the whole atmosphere. There is always going to be some shear, but as long as you don't have extreme wind shear, then you can see these tropical developments. But what we're looking at here is the wind shear out in the Gulf of Mexico. And you can see exactly where Hurricane Milton is. You can see it's actually in an area, a strip throughout the Gulf of Mexico, where there's very low wind shear at the moment. Towards the northern end of the Gulf of Mexico, towards the United States, there is actually very strong wind shear. But where it's sat right now, it's got very low wind shear. Of course, within the actual system, there's quite a lot of wind shear because there's a lot of instability within the thunderstorms and the eye wall. But the general atmosphere, there's not too much wind shear going on at all around this system. Essentially meaning it has free reign to develop as it likes. And that's what it's had the last 24, 48 hours. And that's why it's rapidly deepened the way it has. So essentially what I'm saying is wind shear has not been an obstacle at all for the development of this system. Whereas normally any of these systems encounter a bit of moderate wind shear. It can prohibit development, slow development, or stop development at all. We've had no wind shear issues here, so development has been insane. So this is probably number one reason why this system has developed the way it has in the past 24 hours. Very, very low wind shear. But it also explains why we're expecting it to weaken in the next 36 to 40 hours. As this slowly heads northwards and eastwards, you see it starts to encounter and sort of move into areas of higher wind shear as it approaches Florida. And you see this wrapping up in the north end of the system as it approaches shore. And what this does, it starts to rip apart the system. It's such a large system, so strong, it's not going to rip apart in a matter of minutes or hours, but it slowly degrades the system. And you see on approach, look at the level of wind shear throughout the whole system, ripping it apart as it slowly makes landfall, and you see eventually it dissipates away into more of a generic low out in the Atlantic. So you can see why it's strengthened so much at the moment and why it will lose its intensity in the coming hours. As you can see, it interacts with significant wind shear as we head into Wednesday and then into Thursday as it makes landfall. Interacts significant wind shear. Now, the reason why there's uncertainty on its exact intensity of approach is because if these wind shear forecasts are slightly wrong, if wind shear isn't exactly at the level that the models are forecasting, the track is slightly further away from the higher wind shear, those small differences can make substantial changes to development of the system. And that's why there is still uncertainty on its exact intensity on arrival. But again, I just wanted to highlight why it's been so intense the last 24 to 48 hours and why we're not expecting it to be a Category 5 on landfall. There's a small possibility, but most models have it interacting with this higher wind shear, essentially allowing that storm to be broken down or at least not develop as it has done in the past day or two. And of course, the other main reason is the sea surface temperatures. Now you can see here in the southern region of the Gulf of Mexico, the temperatures are ridiculously warm. Now traditionally for a tropical system you need temperatures in excess of 26.5 degrees Celsius, and you can see pretty much the whole of Gulf of Mexico can facilitate that. It is peak hurricane season, so that's not a surprise. But you can see the yellows and oranges here, temperatures getting up towards 30 degrees Celsius. Again, that just allows fuel to this system, and you can see it is specifically very strong and very warm towards the southern end of the Gulf of Mexico. Again, another factor which has probably allowed this system to develop in the way it has and sustain in the way it has. So Again, I just wanted to highlight those reasons. That is why this system is so strong. Not some magical machine that, Area 51 have or something stupid like that. And I've seen all these theories online saying the government are controlling the weather, this is to do with some sort of election thing, all of this nonsense. No, it's due to atmospheric factors which have almost allowed perfect storm conditions in the southern tip of the Gulf of Mexico. Not going to stay optimal on approach, but still going to see a very severe system. That's pretty much the headline. That's what people should be saying. But no, because, we're in social media, we've got clickbait, people are saying this is, all due to some magical effect, not the fact that we've basically got a perfect storm scenario. Very warm sea surface temperatures, we've got a cluster of thunderstorms, we've got very low wind shear, and it's just allowed the system to develop into essentially the perfect storm at the moment before it gets interrupted with a bit of turbulence as we head towards landfall. So hopefully we've addressed a few things in this video. We've looked at some of the detail behind this system, some of the reasons why this system is so intense, and of course looking at the forecast ahead. Fingers crossed it doesn't counter that wind shear. Fingers crossed it downgrades to a Cat 2, Cat 3, and is nowhere near as intense as some models are making out to be, and nowhere near as intense as it is at the moment. We can only pray. Can't do much else. Again, have a look at this again tomorrow. But again, if you are interested, do check out all these websites that I've mentioned, as they've got a lot of data and you can do a lot of filtering, looking at different things. And again, it's a very fun way to have a look at this system. And yeah, don't get dragged into some of the stuff we see in social media. A lot of the time, it is just for clicks. Even for some reputable sources, it's sometimes just for clicks. The best thing you can do is go to the NHC or go to a reputable meteorologist who actually looks like they're talking sense. And yeah, take what they're saying, even then, with a bit of a pinch of salt. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.